Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam, and this is the 15th episode in my backyard plant propagation series. It's in August now. We're starting to get kind of late on some of these leafy evergreens and these leafy deciduous plants. So I picked some things that I'm pretty sure will root pretty quickly, and we can get them in and out of the house as fast as possible because we are running out of time where these plants have energy up in the upper part of the plant. As it starts to cool off, they'll recall those sugars back down to the roots, and it becomes harder and harder to root these leafy items like this. The conifers we can definitely root going into fall and winter as it cools off, and I will do those episodes probably starting in a season 2 sometime around the middle of fall, and put in some bottom heat in a greenhouse so that I can show you how to do the conifers at that time, or how I do the conifers at that time. Other people have different techniques, but I like to do them in the cool season. These things do not root as well, though, the leafy things that we're going to be doing today. So we're trying to get as many of those things accomplished as possible before the middle of August. That's kind of going to be my cutoff date for doing any of these items. And then we'll start some construction to do the conifers later on after that, and maybe have a heated space for overwintering some of these items that are definitely a little more tender. So anyway, as always, the trays I use, the soil mix, the dip and grow that I'm using, how I mixed it, all of those things are in previous episodes. So make sure you catch up on those episodes to learn about some of the other techniques I'm using, because I won't cover those quite as thoroughly in this episode. So the first thing I'm going to do this week is this Rose of Sharon. They're not very hard to root, and when you pull off a piece from the bottom, it does skin that side, which is absolutely perfect on these. It actually skinned it so far. I don't actually need that much. I'm going to cut it down to maybe ½ an inch where it has that skinned off part. I'm going to come up here to the top and take out the very top of this. It's got a lot of flower buds on it. That needs to go. And then these flower buds that are along the side here are going to take energy away from it. But that's an absolutely perfect cutting. I could cut this leaf off if I want to. Don't pull these leaves off up near the top because it'll skin the side as well. We don't want it skinned up above the soil. But that's perfect right there. I have the dip and grow mixed, 10 parts water to 1 part dip and grow. I'll dip that, kind of knock it off a little bit, stick it into our mix like we always do, just a little ways down, and pinch it in, not too deep with that. But these are pretty straightforward on all of them. Again, I'm going to take the top out of it like that. This one's actually probably longer than I needed. I'm just going to take the bottom stem off of it. And when I pull this, again, it should skin the bottom of it. If it doesn't, I'll take my pruners and cut them like this. I have these pruners and the dip and grow and all these items in a link below if you're interested in acquiring them. And let's see, I'll take off these leaves on the side again. I got to cut them off. I don't want to pull them off because I don't want to risk skinning the bark off of that side. That's a good cutting right there. I've wounded it at the bottom. You can put an angle cut on if you want to. That gives you a little more surface area for it to root in. Same thing, dip it in there, knock it off, stick it maybe a ½ inch to 3/4 of an inch down, and pinch it in. I'm going to do 2 or 3 rows of these Rose of Sharon. Okay, the Rose of Sharon is in. I'm going to do some Forsythia now, and these are super, super easy. Almost any part of this plant will root, and it'll all root pretty quickly. So normally I say don't use the wispy little new growth with some of the older, firmer growth at the bottom. It won't matter on Forsythia. Pretty much anything will root. We could really just take the bottom leaves off of that one right there, just like that, and not use the rooting hormone at all, and just stick it in there. Almost certainly this is going to root. This is a variegated Forsythia called Kumsin, but I'll take it like that with the 2 leaves on the top. And if you want to, you can wound it a little bit. You'll get more root initiation there and more roots coming out of it. Obviously, it'll establish itself much quicker, but you can dip it and then stick it halfway down. Honestly, probably wouldn't matter that much on Forsythia how you did these. I'm going to do one more as an example, but again, there you go. There's 1 leaf node there where we've cleaned the leaves off of it. I've left 2 leaves at the top. If we wanted to, we could just leave 1 leaf at the top. Like I say, it probably won't matter. We can wound it or not wound it. I like wounding them just because I'll get roots out of that entire wound rather than just right out of the base of where the cut was made. Again, put it in the rooting hormone, stick it in there, pinch it in where it's not down deep in the cell. So anyway, I'm going to do 2 or 3 rows of these Cumson Forsythia. So the next item I'm going to do is blackberries. These are thornless blackberries right here. Pretty much any part of this plant will root. I like to use the center part. The leaf piece here would probably actually root. I don't think that would be a problem to actually root that piece right there, but that's just not the way I've ever done it. I like to do it on a heavier stem like this. This is probably too many leaves. They're going to end up blocking the water out. So I'll take off one of those, leave the stem just like this. These root super, super easy. I will take and wound the edge of it like that, and I'll put a fresh cut on it. You can see where I made the cut on it when I took these is already healed over a little bit. So before I stick it in the rooting hormone, I will put a fresh cut on it. So now I've wounded it, put a fresh cut on it. It's that center part of the branch, which blackberries grow so fast, you can just get lots and lots of cuttings off of one of these. You can see this piece right here. I can probably get 5 or 6 cuttings off of just that one piece. So anyway, super, super easy, just like that. And just make them all look consistent so they'll root in about the same amount of time. I'm going to go up 2 leaves, take the bottom one off, reduce the amount of leaves so it doesn't block the water for its neighbor. I can even go and take that down to 1 leaf like that. I'll wound it. I'll put a fresh cut on the bottom of it and stick it in just like that. Maybe about 1/2 inch to 1 inch down, pinch it in. That's perfect. I'm going to do 2 rows of these blackberries, and this is pretty much any blackberry you'd ever want to root. Thorn blackberries obviously are a little harder to work with, but they root exactly the same. You're just gonna, and the growth is exactly the same. You just may want to wear gloves while you do it though, because they do bite back. And on the thorned blackberries, typically you can grab a thorn somewhere near the base of it and pull it this way and actually create that wound by peeling back from the thorn. That's the way I've always done that, but your fingers will definitely end up very tender if you do it without gloves on. But anyway, I'm going to do 2 rows of these blackberries. So the last thing I'm going to put in this flat is a Loropetalum, which is this purple new foliage evergreen shrub. Gets those pink frilly flowers. Now there's some red varieties and white varieties as well on these. These are not as easy to root as the other 3 things I've put in the tray. I'll take a piece of this year's growth that's hardened off in the center just a little bit, and that piece is probably 3 to 4 inches long, and we'll pull off the bottom one like that to strip that space right there. I'll put that new cut on it. Now I don't want to pull any more pieces off of the side of it because I don't want to strip them off up higher, just like that. And we'll just continue to reduce these. And then I'll take that newest growth right off the tip right there. And that should be perfect. I'm going to dip this in the rooting hormone, just like that. And same thing as the rest of them, just barely stick it down in there and pinch it in. What's interesting on these Loropetalum is when they root, they're not the easiest thing in the world to root, but when they root, they actually root with purple roots, which you'll see when you pull one of these out. It's really kind of interesting. But again, I'll take a piece of this year's growth. That wood, the wood part of that's probably 3 inches long there. I'll pull that bottom one off right there, which leaves me that wound, and I'll make this cut right there at the base so that wound is still there. Trim these side pieces up just like that. Hold this together, take off this new growth off the top with a nice clean cut just like that. We'll dip it in the dip and grow right there and pinch it in just like that. And I'm going to finish out the last 2 rows with these Loropetalum. As always, I've put the labels in the flat. This Rose of Sharon is called Minerva. This Forsythia is Cumson Forsythia, and I put the date on the back of it. These are blackberries here, and this is Loropetalum is called Ruby. So I have them all labeled and ready to go into the propagation house. I also made a few extra of the blackberry and Forsythia cuttings to put into our alternative technique for rooting. As you can see, I stuck the Forsythia and the blackberries in the back of this box, and they should easily root into that. A couple other things I forgot to say last week is make sure that when you put these flats from the greenhouse out under your deck or someplace where they're protected, make sure you keep them on a tray elevated off the ground. We definitely don't want to be sitting these things on the ground. You can pass all kinds of things back and forth from the soil up into these flats. One other thing you'll notice is these crepe myrtles have lost some leaves. They didn't have enough roots on them underneath to support this much growth. That mist was kind of compensating for it. So when we took it out of the mist, I'm just going to cut these in half. It's absolutely no big deal. They'll just flush right back out from that. But anyway, I would definitely want to just show you that you want to elevate these when you bring them out of the house. So here's the flat we did today, and the 3 that I have put back in the house. We still have a couple spots I want to get filled before we finished on these leafy cuttings. So I'll be back next week with another episode. Thanks for watching.